Hi, and welcome to the Senate webinar. Let's get started, shall we? The session that I will present today is a presentation I actually held at both AVD TechFest and Citrix User Group Sweden last year. So if you have tuned in, my assumption would be that you are working with some type of a virtual desktop solution, or at least have some knowledge of it. Continuing on that sentiment, it has probably not escaped from you that there are loads of different VDI and DaaS solutions out there, and all of them are providing the same value for end users and organizations alike, really, only that the road there differs, of course. In this webinar, I'll be talking about two solutions specifically: Azure Virtual Desktop, that is natively, and Citrix Cloud with virtual apps and desktops, more specifically known as Citrix DaaS. This will be with a perspective from an engineer in the field working with these technologies in parallel, how they differentiate, and in the end, you will know how these two products actually can benefit from each other. But who am I? Well, my name is Hanessa Milaszewski, and I work as an expert engineer at Zenit. I work within a team called Workspace, specializing in virtual desktop platforms. It's mainly Azure Virtual Desktop and Citrix in the cloud and on premises, but also sometimes Windows 365 and remote desktop services, along with adjacent technologies such as thin clients. As for myself, I've had my hand within the end user computing area since the start of my career, really. That was at 19 years old. That was over 8 years ago. During those years, I've gotten the opportunity to be involved in vastly different industries, such as the public sector and private companies within engineering, retail, healthcare, and finance. This could, for instance, be heading the technical lead role in new implementation and migration projects, recurring operations for our customers using our services, along with taking on consulting assignments. You can imagine that this experience has really broadened my perspective. These industries all have different requirements, yet at the same time have found a common value in leveraging virtual desktop solutions. In the end, though, I see myself primarily as an engineer in the field. Now that I've shared a bit about myself, I will bring this engineer mindset into my session according to the agenda here. As a starting point, a crash course. I know that this could be repetition for you, but I really want to ensure that we're on the same page continuing forward, that the next slides will really make sense for you. We will then continue with a deep dive into three specific areas for these technologies, mainly from an ops engineer standpoint using multi-session on Azure. So we were talking about image and provisioning, session options, and insights, and how these areas can look when utilizing AVD and Citrix DaaS respectively. To finish up this session, I will give you my personal conclusions on AVD and Citrix DaaS and a type of a summary. So, a refresher on AVD. I would describe Azure Virtual Desktop as a type of platform as a service, and given its name, available in Azure only. If I were to describe this for, say, decision maker, I would say it's a product enabling you to deliver a Windows experience to your workforce, regardless of what physical client they're on. Another description of AVD could also be the next generation of Microsoft's earlier product called Remote Desktop Services, or RDS. The difference there being that you do not deploy the infrastructure components on separate servers, such as the gateway, brokers, and so on and so forth. So these components that belong to the access and management layer, if you will, is instead managed by Microsoft themselves when using AVD. This leaves us, administrators or engineers, if you will, to focus on the fun parts, managing what's arguably more closer and important for the end user's experience in a virtual desktop. That could entail images, applications, profiles, scaling plans, and so on and so forth. Ensuring that that particular wallpaper sits nicely in the user's desktops, for instance. So comparably between RDS and AVD, AVD is fantastic. Less headaches in managing. I'm not going to delve too much into this picture, but I merely want to visualize for you how a conceptual architecture can look with AVD. In this case, being a type of hybrid setup. So if you follow Microsoft's well-architected framework or even their cloud adoption framework, you can count on that your Azure subscription, which hosts the AVD service, will consist mostly of Azure machines. The subscription could consist of storage accounts as well, where user profiles resides or having a shared storage area for your AVD users. This same subscription will then require some network-related resources, as seen here, for instance, an express route for connecting your Entra Connect server on premises to the AVD landing zone or site, enabling this hybrid setup, really. So these AVD gateway and broker infrastructure components, where are they here? Well, they are actually hidden away within the AVD control plane, meaning that they don't exist as unique Azure resources within your Azure subscription. Because again, Microsoft manages the access and management layer for you when using AVD. So looking into Citrix Cloud with DaaS, it's similar in some ways and some ways not. At first, I would describe Citrix DaaS as a suite of virtualized solutions because it supports various types of resource locations. It's not only Microsoft Azure as the public cloud of choice, but Citrix also supports Amazon Web Services and even Google Cloud. It also supports your favorite hypervisors on premises, for an example, Hyper-V, VMware, and Nutanix. Still, Citrix is similar to AVD, given that you are able to deliver a Windows experience for your end users, regardless of what physical client they're on. The addition here, however, is that Citrix can also deliver a Linux experience on the same basis. There's even the capability of delivering Mac OS as a remote desktop. This is currently in tech preview, though. We again can see similarities between Citrix DaaS and AVD in the way that Citrix themselves manages the access and management layer, so that we as administrators or engineers can focus on the fun parts such as images, applications, profiles, scaling plans, and not to forget that wallpaper in the desktop. So how is it possible that Citrix DaaS can utilize various types of public clouds and hypervisors? Well, this thanks to the so-called Citrix Cloud connectors. These connectors are to be installed on your resource location of choice. For an example, we have an Azure site that we want to utilize. Simply put, you deploy new virtual machines and install the Citrix Cloud Connector software on these same machines. This installation is a next finish install, basically, where you will enter your Citrix Cloud tenant ID. After this is done, we have successfully attached the Citrix Cloud control plane with your resource location of choice. As you might understand, the Citrix Cloud connectors are a requirement. As seen in this picture, they are responsible for handling all of these services, more or less replacing the traditional delivery controllers in the typical Citrix on-premises setup. It's a super glue, basically, so that we don't need to hassle around with port openings and similar should we have a complex networking environment. Yes, that's a very quick crash course. Moving on, though, onto particular bits on the field with these technologies. One of the most time-consuming area might possibly be imaging and provisioning. You kind of can't miss out on this. But if you for some reason have, no need to worry. In this part, I will discuss some of the options that exist and how an imaging routine could look both for AVD and Citrix DaaS. Something we need to know first is that within an AVD host pool, we can deploy what I like to call static or persistent session hosts. And with that being said, our focus mostly falls on our imaging options. Let's say that you're new on using AVD. Then I would say that the options here on your left are for starters, with Azure Marketplace probably being one of your first areas to visit, with loads of different base images to use when deploying a new VM. Oftentimes when talking about AVD, the multi-session image is of most interest. And if you really feel like spicing things up, you can actually choose an image with Microsoft 365 apps included. But of course, it's rarely enough with a completely clean Windows 10 or Windows 11 image, even with the Office suite included. We want to have your own applications installed, maybe have that specific desktop wallpaper configured as well. In that case, we need to look into a so-called golden image routine, meaning that we take that multi-session image from Azure Marketplace and deploy it to a machine. And based on that machine, or in addition to that machine, we configure it to our own liking. Proceeding with that routine, we now need a way of storing our own golden images as well. We can do that by either storing it as a managed image resource in our Azure subscription, but preferably I'd say you want to save it as a new image version within an Azure Compute gallery. This will ensure that you have a nice revision management of your own images and an easier time with replicating the images through multiple Azure regions. Now, if you want to spice up things for real as a more experienced engineer, if you will, or even have a more complex AVD platform, I'd say it's about time to look into using one of the options to your right, at least. And I think I will go through this a bit quickly, not to take up too much time, but Azure VM Image Builder is a type of a images as code interpretation for creating images. It's actually based on HashiCorp's Packer product. So through using JSON files and customization script, we can build an image to our own liking. We also have custom image templates, which is relatively new. And this is actually based on Azure VM Image Builder, only that it kind of provides you with a somewhat graphical interface on the build process of the Azure VM Image Builder function. So basically, it's a ClickOps alternative. You click on what base image you want and which customization scripts should be run in order to create that image that you want. We also have MSIX app attach and also app attach. Confusing, right? Well, this is an option maybe if you want to throw the imaging out of the window and focus more on packaging apps. And that will be for apps that support these two products. Then there's obviously a lot more than these, but that kind of gives you the idea with AVD, bare minimum. You are either pushed to building your own automation and templates, or even buy licenses for using a third-party solution, such as Nerdio Manager, which is really huge. And using that third-party tooling, it can be a requirement for people when they grow out of their small AVD platform. But let's look at Azure Virtual Desktop in its vanilla form. In that case, I believe that the golden image routine qualifies for this. Let's look a bit quickly into how a process like that could go. So to start off, we create a new VM based on that Windows 10 or Windows 11 multi-session image. Said and done, we take a so-called initial snapshot of the golden VM, and this is not a requirement, but I like to do it just in case if the forthcoming customizations that we will proceed with could go awry. You never know. Said and done, we continue with carrying out our customizations. In this example here, we can see a configuration for the FS Logic's profile management product. So it could, for instance, be that we configure here or even install applications that we want to have within our golden image. We do all of our configurations, and then I would say that you could take a final snapshot of your golden VM, and this will save time in case the next coming step would go awry. We have taken our final snapshot, and then we can continue with the sysprep and capture, basically taking this golden VM and outputting it to a generalized image version. And finally, now that we have an image version, we can populate an AVD host pool with machines based on this image that we have. Yes, we did it. Our first host pool containing machines to our own liking. But wait a minute. We sometimes need to update our image with new customizations and similar, new updates for applications, not to forget Windows updates every month. What do we do here then? Well, It's the same procedure as before, only that you instead use your latest image version as your base instead. Because if you didn't forget or know, uh, sysprepping and the sysprep and capture makes this golden VM no longer able to be booted. So added upon that, we need to ensure that the older machines in your AVD host pool are drained from active sessions, since we can only deploy new static machines in AVD. Finally, when the old machines have been drained, we can then proceed to remove them from the host pool, ensuring that users are on the latest image. Now, granted, you might think this is absolutely not the way to do it. Intune exists for a reason, right? Sure, I hear your sentiment, but for a pooled host pools with multi-session, I think the expectation is to have a controlled way of deploying new updates, a single source of truth, if you will. Because I guarantee you, you will risk a differentiating configuration with persistent machines, which AVD host pools consist of, when Intune has a quite of a random sync schedule for new configuration. And that fact can have colossal consequences for the users in this particular scenario. So, unfortunately, our only way really is an image routine like this, acting as a catch-all option. If you're using Citrix DaaS on Azure, you have the same imaging options as AVD, of course, for deploying static or persistent machines. But I have to note that Citrix DaaS comes included with provisioning tools as well, no matter what resource location you have. I don't have too much time to delve too deep on these, but I want you to be aware that Citrix MCS and PVS exist. So between these, I would say that Citrix MCS is the vanilla way of provisioning machines with DaaS. It's often a passive component, really. It's only there to basically orchestrate the image build process and publishing it to your machines in a Citrix machine catalog. It's a super easy options. Basically, you just choose your image, and that image will copy itself onto the chosen machine catalog with the same computer objects remaining. No fuss. Citrix provisioning is the more advanced option due to it being an active component. You need dedicated service running this provisioning service. So basically what it's able to do is that it's able to stream images to the machines where end users end up on, lowering the copying of images traffic, so to say. It also has advanced versioning, a base image with increments, lowering the amount of storage used, and perhaps even lowering storage costs in the long run. But since I consider the Citrix MCS image routine to be the vanilla version, let's look at that routine in the same manner as we did with AVD. So the first step is identical. We create a new VM based on this Windows 10 and Windows 11 multi-session image. So that's that. Um, Then, actually, right at the second step, I think we can proceed with carrying out customizations directly. And you will understand soon why I think that's a viable option. So with customizations here being that we install the Citrix VDA component that is required for enabling remote access for a machine using DaaS. So let's go ahead and install that in this step. Let's continue to the third step. Here, I actually think you can shut down the machine immediately and take a full snapshot of this golden VM once we are done with our customizations. And soon you'll understand why. And when we have that snapshot, we can directly take this snapshot to update our Citrix machine catalog. And as you can see here, we can even schedule it to apply on the machines after the next shutdown. No joke. That's the routine. So how is this possible? Well, the thing with Citrix MCS is that MCS handles the sysprep and generalizing for you. And with that capability in MCS, you can imagine it's faster and much more simplified in creating images and updating existing ones. I mean, we can even see this with how we handle new customizations using Citrix MCS. You simply need to boot your golden VM and proceed from point 2. And this works because we never needed to carry out the sysprep, and the golden VM is therefore intact and reusable. And because we are using snapshots as image revisions now, you always have an easy rollback point should something go awry. That's amazing, actually. Yes, imaging and provisioning is a mouthful of a talking point when it comes to both of these products, but now we are done with that area, so let's move on onto session options. What I mean by session options here in this forthcoming part is the ability to control how a virtual desktop session behaves when presented on a client computer. For an example, it could be for optimizing the session experience or even for security intentions. Definitely an area of interest when you are an engineer on the field. Let's look into this for both AVD and Citrix DaaS. Session options for AVD would naturally be the aptly named RDP properties. You know, RDP being Microsoft's proprietary protocol for presenting a GUI for a remote computer over network connections. Pretty clever name. Now, we do have a wide range of settings to choose from here. Let's look into them a bit quick. The first category we have is connection information. What I can say here is we have this category contains that last setting for enabling Entra ID single sign-on, which is cool. We have session behavior, and it's mostly network related in how the session can be optimized in terms of what these types of settings are, good end user wise. We also have device redirection, and I would say this is the biggest and most important setting or category of settings that you will need to look into. We can here choose what audio, video, or other local devices should be redirected into an AVD session. So this category is absolutely key security-wise. We don't necessarily want to redirect every type of device into an enterprise AVD desktop. And then we have display settings for configuring that, or for configuring a default on how the session window will be presented initially. Maybe you have to take into account with all the different monitors that users have. All of these settings, they are great and all, but I do have a big pet peeve concerning these. It's specifically the assignment. It's per host pool with no option of configuring these per user group, for an example. That's not great, and I will tell you why. I think many might relate as an engineer on the field, but I've been through a lot of instances where an organization requests that some users need a certain exception for something. It could, for an example, be a hi. We need the possibility of redirecting a particular USB device to the virtual desktop. We need it for a business critical use case. As for USB redirection, that's generally something we do not want to allow per default as a security measure, really. So how would we approach this without tampering with the security level for the rest of the users? With AVD, the solution would need to be to create a host pool per every individual persona, meaning every user group will have their specific redirection requirement. It could be per USB, it could be per printer, it could be per clipboard settings, and so on and so forth, depending on what they need. Obviously, we lose a huge portion of our scalability of the environment doing this, though. It's not optimal, but solution-wise, it will do. I really hope Microsoft addresses this in the future. Looking into session options for Citrix DaaS, its equivalent here would be Citrix policies. They are also known as ICA policies, aptly so due to Citrix proprietary protocol is called ICA. What do we have to play around with here? Well, as a starter, we have a lot more than you need, to be frank. I can't emphasize this enough. Just look at the video to the right. That's me scrolling through it all at a timely pace. It took me 30 seconds. It's crazy. So obviously I can't go through all of them, but I will share some of the cool things you can do with Citrix policies. The first one that comes to my mind is the dynamic session watermarking, which I like to say acts as an extension of a screen capture protection. Should someone take a picture on the monitor and it would then leak after a breach, we can then have still some traceability based on connection time, username, and client IP address. It's a cool feature, and actually, I do know that AVD got a similar function nowadays. But if you've seen AVD's equivalents, it's only a QR code that's being presented as a watermark. And that QR code leads to the connection ID for the remote session in question. Makes you wonder if you even can scan it based on a low resolution phone image. And frankly, I also think it's in bad taste when you think about QR code phishing attempts making rounds lately. And with Citrix policies, we also have something called granular printer redirection, or meaning that you can configure exactly what printers will be redirected and not. I don't like printers generally, but this policy I do like. So in this example here, we need to redirect in headquarters pull print queue, but don't want to end up with duplicates with the typical XPS and OneNote queues. In AVD, this is only a yes or no option whether you want to redirect printers. So this policy is far more flexible. But the coolest thing, or the mother lode, I would say is client USB redirection rules. This is a great thing. As I mentioned previously, there's always going to be those end users who need the exception to redirect an USB device. Well, with this policy, this is part of your solution. As seen in this example here, we allow specific Space Mouse devices. We can not only allow them, but we can granularly open them for use based on a vendor or even a product ID level. Therefore, having a block on all other USB devices still. I should actually add here that AVD recently got a similar vendor product ID feature documented now, so you can achieve a similar block or enable for USB devices with AVD nowadays, which is very nice. But still, the everlasting question, what about the assignment? Well, yes, you can configure different policies based on user groups. And if that isn't enough, you can also base these using client IP scope, client name, OU path, tags, and etc. So the solution with that example with redirecting a specific USB device for a specific set of users, I would simply say yes. Yes, we can. Moving on, let's talk a bit about insights. We all know that we are capable of deploying and configuring great VDI and DaaS platforms to organizations' liking. But obviously, it doesn't end there. A great platform also requires maintenance and a form of insight into its current usage and overall health. You know, preferably a type of dashboard that tells us clearly what's going on with the environment and how we can improve and develop it further. One of the ways of doing this is by using the included monitoring tools. Let's look what both AVD and Citrix DaaS offers from the start. So, insights in AVD. Boy, do I have opinions on this. So, first and foremost, insights in AVD requires that you deploy a so-called log analytics workspace resource within your Azure subscription. It's a sort of a data log repository, really, to collect logs and tables and being able to output them to dashboards, workbooks, etc., when you're doing log queries. When that's prepared, we can start to run these standardized configuration workbooks within AVD to set up many of the AVD infrastructure monitoring categories. Should you need to monitor session host data, then we also need to deploy the log analytics agent to the session hosts and ensure that they report to your log analytics workspace. Let's say we do all of that, and what do we end up with? Are there more people than me who think that you kind of need a degree to navigate and understand this? I mean, we are not rocket scientists, are we? Sure, I might be exaggerating a bit, but honestly, I don't think I can present this to a decision maker and bet that they will understand what's going on here. Now, granted, it was way worse before, and this preview, as you see here, is nowadays the default view, which is nice. So it's going in the right direction, but I still have that feeling that even we as administrators deserve a nice experience, don't you think? There's an upside to this though. With going through all of the hassle with preparing AVD insights, you now have a basis for logging basically everything, such as specific event logs, and possibly you have enough motivation still for building that dashboard yourself according to your own needs. So they say a picture could mean 1,000 words, and while it isn't as dramatic, I do think that this dashboard is designed as purpose driven. Now, there's a lot of warnings here. It wouldn't be as much if you were happening to work within my designed environments. But in this example, taken from the Citrix official documentation, you gotta admit how clearly it states the environment's current health. So you see, as you can see here, you got the amount of user connection failures and target machine failures, and these type of failures are divided into general categories. So from the get-go, you can get a feeling on what actions need to be taken. This is real-time insight, actually. What does it require to be set up, this dashboard? Well, in fact, nothing. As soon as you deploy your first Citrix machine catalog, attach it with a delivery group and let users log on to their resources, these statistics will begin to appear. I think this is the way to do it. Now, should you think that the former dashboard was complicated or just too much? No need to worry. If we want to, we can even assign a help desk role for people, which grants you this following view. No fuss. A help desk agent can directly search after the user or their machine or their endpoint and find out how this user session is doing. Keep it simple, stupid. So you might think I've been too hard on AVD, like this was an entire bashing contest. To that, I will say, don't get me wrong, I truly adore working with these technologies. They provide the same value, but the road there differs. They offer other segments, making the pursuit of leveraging virtual desktop platforms as an idea less intimidating. I love that. More of the fun for me as an engineer. But alas, I have to be true to myself, and this is my personal conclusions. As of now, I see AVD as a truly good enough solution. I like it being this honest, what you see is what you get. You see, once the spring update of 2020 entered amidst the pandemic, AVD really positioned itself in its usefulness with this update providing a graphical interface for deployment, which was before limited with running PowerShell modules only. Organizations realize this. Like the bar for entering virtual desktop solutions was much more lowered. It was perfect for the workforce being suddenly remote. And yet, AVD is still growing at a fast rate with new functions added regularly. So I truly believe it won't just disappear in the near future. I don't think you're doing a bad investment in AVD. It's getting there and it's exciting. But truthfully so, AVD is not always a one size fits all at this moment in time. So that's where I believe Citrix DaaS comes in, when organizations just need something that just works out of the box in every possible regard. No fuss. Trust me, working with a lot of complicated organizations, it's the things in the fine print that really make an impact sometimes. If you remember that example with redirecting specific USB devices for specific individuals, that feature itself can act as a deal breaker. But here's the fun thing with both AVD and DaaS. You can actually combine these products because when you use Citrix DaaS with Azure as your resource location, it's suddenly AVD on paper. This is expressed through being able to use the Windows 10 or Windows 11 multi-session image, which in itself is unique for Azure. Using that image as base for your multi-session desktops, you suddenly don't need to pay for RDS CAL licenses anymore, but you can instead fully utilize your classic E3 and E5 licenses, which basically everyone has nowadays. In addition to that, using the Citrix MCS routine for provisioning machines enables us to utilize something called ephemeral disks. As a quick explanation of ephemeral disks, these are disks that are temporary and faster than premium SSD disks in Azure. If you use these as OS disks in your Citrix machine catalogs, it works wonders. You cannot achieve this with AVD natively, as far as I know now. But the real kicker with ephemeral disks, they are free of charge. So yeah, the AVD and Citrix DaaS combination is definitely something to look into. Lastly, I believe that we, within this end user computing field, have to be a bit honest with ourselves because there's something called the lock-in effect. And I think we really need to consider it as a real risk, even for AVD in the future. Hear me out. We can, for instance, see between developers this agnostic idea of leveraging technologies, and this is becoming more prevalent with infrastructure as code becoming a norm. Even in the cloud field, we now have more options on what public clouds to use. We gotta be honest here. Is it gonna be Azure for the rest of our lives? Or are we going to utilize another public cloud vendor? Or even bring our cloud infrastructure back to the ground again? Hear me out. These questions are a reality for some of the organizations I've worked with, and we as engineers have to be sincere and understanding to this. So I can continue to rant on with these technologies, but let me give you a bit of a visual summary. This, as you see, is how I see AVD currently. It is indeed a competent desktop and app virtualization service that gives you a bare minimum solution to further build upon. You don't need to worry about taking care of the infrastructure components in the management layer, and you get basic monitoring and auto-scaling possibilities. This, truth be told, will often fit the general crowd. However, sometimes AVD isn't good enough. That's where I believe Citrix DaaS comes in. You get a full smorgasbord of features to use in conjunction of your desktop and app virtualization service. Whether it's faster imaging through Citrix' own provisioning services, being able to meet security requirements with granular ICA policies, or provide a modern graphical admin interface. It also supports Linux and Mac OS workloads for your developers. And not to forget, support for several other hypervisors, both on premises and in public clouds, not only Azure, and all of this simultaneously. So, in other words, choose the right product for the right case. I hope this webinar was interesting and gave you some insights in what solution fits your situation. Keep in mind that I have merely scratched the surface when looking into AVD and Citrix DaaS. There are so many more areas that I unfortunately didn't have time to cover. As you might understand, this is a bit of a jungle, but do not fret. We have a whole team at Zenit who specializes in this area and would love to help you navigate and picking the right solution for you. So please feel free to contact us at Zenit and let's discuss. Thank you so much for your time today. Bye.